Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's topic touches on something that weighs heavily on the minds of many men in relationships, especially in our modern, fast-paced, and often highly demanding work environments. If you've ever wondered whether your partner's recent behavior is simply a result of job stress or something more, like a shift in emotional or romantic attachment, you are not alone. Questions about fidelity can quietly grow when subtle communication, routine, or emotional connection changes begin to surface. But before we jump to conclusions, it's essential to remember that signs are not proof. They are signals, clues that something may deserve a closer look, and how we choose to respond to those signs can either build clarity or cause unnecessary conflict. This video takes a grounded psychological approach to exploring 7 key signs that might indicate something deeper is going on in your relationship. We'll break down each behavior in detail, explore what might be driving it, from emotional distancing to work pressures, and most importantly, show you how to evaluate it fairly, without rushing into blame or mistrust. The goal here isn't to create fear. It's to help you better understand what's happening so you can move forward with confidence, clarity, and self-respect. So, if you've been quietly noticing changes and wondering what they might mean, stay with us through the end of the video. Let's take this journey together, one thoughtful step at a time. Sign 1. Unusual changes in work schedule. At first, it seems harmless. She starts staying late at work more often, mentioning unexpected meetings or last-minute business trips that never used to happen before. The hours become unpredictable and the reasons feel vague even when she tries to explain. You want to believe it's all part of her professional growth. After all, life changes and ambition can come with new responsibilities. But deep down, something feels off. The shift isn't just in time, but in tone. When you ask her how her day was, the answers become shorter and less specific. There used to be stories and details, but now there's just, "It was fine," or "just a long day." If you ask more, she might get defensive or brush it off. What once was open now feels guarded, and that energy shift speaks even louder than the hours she's away. Not every change means betrayal. Sometimes the weight of her career demands real-time attention. A promotion, a tough boss, or a big project can pull anyone into long days and mental exhaustion. But what matters most is how she brings that part of her world back to you. Does she still want to share the little details? Does she still want to be seen? The hard truth is that some women use work as cover when emotional distance has already crept in. It may not be about her job if she's disengaged at home but suddenly fully booked outside. It could be time spent elsewhere, physically or emotionally. The signs are often subtle. She starts dressing differently for work, or seems more excited about office events than time with you. Her phone is always face down, and her calendar is strangely full but light on explanation. Still, it's easy to let suspicion become the loudest voice in your head. That's where many men go wrong. Accusations only drive deeper distances. Instead of jumping to conclusions, ask with calm curiosity. Not, "Where were you last night?" but, "Is everything okay lately? You seem stretched." What matters isn't just what she says, but how she says it. Emotional honesty leaves a trace. Avoidance does too. There's a saying worth remembering. When someone's pattern shifts suddenly, the truth isn't always in their words, it's in their rhythm. Pay attention not to the clock, but to the consistency. Is her schedule changing, or is her investment in the relationship fading? Work can take time, but love should still make time feel shared. When her schedule stops making sense, it may not be about the hours she's gone, It's about whether she still brings herself home. Sign 2. Increase secrecy with phone/computer. She tilts her phone slightly away when a message comes in, or quickly locks the screen when you enter the room. Maybe she changes her password without mentioning it, or suddenly becomes uncomfortable when you're near her computer. These aren't declarations, but shifts, and they speak quietly. Noticing them doesn't mean you're insecure. It means you're paying attention. In a healthy relationship, openness is often effortless. If she once handed you her phone without hesitation, or left her laptop open while making dinner, these new behaviors would feel like shadows where there used to be light. While not every shift in privacy signals betrayal, it always signals something worth understanding. Secrecy is often more about energy than evidence. It's the anxious glance when you're near the screen, the quick swipe to clear a notification, the way her body stiffens if you ask, "Who was that?" Sometimes it's innocent, a work message that carries confidentiality or a moment of needing mental space. But other times, it's the first layer of a wall being built between you. Absolute dishonesty rarely begins with lies. It starts with omission, a deleted text, a cleared call log, and a hidden chat window. These actions don't confirm betrayal, but suggest that something in her world is no longer meant for you. That shift in access often reflects a more profound change in emotional trust. It's important not to accuse without understanding, but it's just as important not to ignore what your intuition notices. If she becomes defensive when questioned or dismisses your concerns with jokes or irritation, the resistance is information. It's not the secrecy that hurts most, it's the message it carries. Something she's doing isn't meant to be seen. Still, a relationship isn't a courtroom. It's a conversation. And, rather than assuming the worst, it's wiser to ask what's changed, not out of suspicion, but from a place of connection. You used to be open with your phone. Has something changed? A question like that invites honesty without pressure, and how she answers, or doesn't answer, will tell you more than 100 unlocked messages ever could. There's a saying, if something needs to be hidden, it may not belong in a relationship, but equally valid is this. Sometimes people pull away not because they're unfaithful, but because they feel unseen, unheard, or overwhelmed. Your job isn't to control, but to understand, to stay calm, observant, and clear. When trust starts to fade, it doesn't always leave with a bang. Sometimes it slips away quietly, one password at a time. Sign 3. Frequently mentioning a specific colleague or avoiding questions about them. It begins with small mentions. It's a story about something that happened at work, a funny comment someone made during a meeting, a casual reference that slips in once or twice. At first, it feels normal. People spend most of their day at work, and colleagues become part of their stories. But then the same name keeps appearing, not obviously, but in a pattern that starts to form if you're listening closely. She talks about him with enthusiasm that seems slightly out of place. There's a tone she uses that's different, a lightness, a familiarity that suggests more than just shared office space. And then, when you ask about him, directly or not, her response shifts. Maybe she answers vaguely or changes the subject altogether. Maybe her mood hardens just a little. Or perhaps she smiles, but doesn't say anything at all. That silence isn't empty, it's calculated. Psychologically, when someone keeps showing up in conversation, it's because they occupy space in the mind. Repetition often reflects emotional relevance, and when that repetition is paired with sudden evasiveness, it's a sign that something in her mind wants to protect that connection from scrutiny. It doesn't automatically mean she's cheating, but it does mean that this person matters to her in a way she may not be ready to admit, even to herself. Sometimes it's harmless, a trusted colleague, a mentor, someone who helps her feel seen and valued in a space that can often feel cold or competitive. But emotional attention is never neutral. When a woman forms an emotional alliance with someone else, especially in a consistent and familiar environment like work, the lines between connection and attraction can blur quickly. What starts as appreciation can evolve quietly into attachment. The key isn't to accuse or assume, but to observe. Ask about her day casually, listen without judgment. What details does she offer freely? Which ones does she skip? Are her stories consistent, or do they shift depending on your tone? What she says and how she says it often reveals where her attention truly is. A quiet saying applies here. What we mention often lives close to the heart. When one name begins to surface more than it should, it's not always a sign of betrayal, but it is a signal, a sign that something emotional is unfolding, either openly or in secret. And in matters of love, what's emotional is often just as important as physical. Sign 4. Unusual emotional changes. You don't always see the shift coming. One day, her distant replies feel colder, and her tone is sharper even in casual conversations. The next day, she's unusually cheerful, animated, smiling for no apparent reason. It's a quiet contradiction that leaves you confused, not because of what she says, but because of what she doesn't. When emotional rhythms change without explanation, it's rarely random. Something beneath the surface is stirring, and her behavior starts to speak louder than her words. Irritability and detachment often come from emotional conflict. She may feel guilt over something she hasn't said, or a growing disconnection she doesn't know how to name. You ask simple questions and she reacts with frustration or silence. You reach for closeness and she pulls back. These aren't always signs of betrayal, but they are signs of emotional distance. And emotional distance doesn't appear overnight. It often builds slowly while something else distracts her attention. At the same time, sudden happiness can be just as telling. When she lights up without cause and becomes overly affectionate or suddenly full of energy, it may seem positive on the surface. But sometimes that joy isn't rooted in the relationship, it's excitement created elsewhere. Not always another person. Sometimes it's a personal win at work, a breakthrough with family, or even a new sense of direction in life. But other times, it's the spark of novelty, the rush of something new that exists beyond the boundaries of your connection. Emotional changes are like background music. They set the tone even if you're not consciously listening. That's why you have to observe the context. Is her mood only different around you, or does it extend into other areas of her life? Is she stressed at work, withdrawn with friends, or only different when you're alone together? Pay attention without accusation. Approach her not with pressure, but with presence. Invite her to share, rather than demand an explanation. Not every emotional shift points to infidelity. People go through seasons and struggles that don't always make sense on the surface. But when her reactions no longer match your reality, joy feels disconnected from your bond, or coldness creeps in where warmth used to live, it's time to listen more closely, not just to her words, but to her emotional patterns. Because the heart speaks in behaviors long before it finds the courage to speak in sentences. A saying fits here: people show you what they feel long before they tell you. And when you learn to read her silence, outbursts, and unexplained cheerfulness, you understand that emotional truth often arrives disguised in contradiction. What matters is not jumping to conclusions, but staying awake to the signs. Sign 5. Less attention to the relationship. It rarely happens overnight. At first it's subtle. She forgets to ask how your day went or seems distracted when you talk. The small rituals that once brought you close, late-night talks, shared meals, quiet touches, fade without warning. And though she's still in the room, something about her presence feels thinner and less grounded. What you're sensing isn't just forgetfulness, it's emotional distance. When a woman begins to pull her attention away from the relationship, it can point to several things. Sometimes it's stress. Work may be demanding more of her mental space, or she may feel overwhelmed in ways she can't yet articulate. But other times her emotional energy is simply being redirected, and where her attention goes, her connection follows. That doesn't mean she's cheating. Emotional withdrawal doesn't always involve another man, but it does mean that something once alive between you is now struggling for air. If you find yourself always initiating, if she rarely makes time or avoids shared activities you once enjoyed, these are signs that the relationship is slipping from her list of priorities. And what matters to a person is always visible in what they choose to make time for. A telling truth about emotional availability is this: the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. That's not a random phase when she stops engaging, and you feel more like a background presence than a partner. It's often a reflection of where her heart is, and where it's no longer willing to be. But before assuming betrayal, it's essential to test for care, something together. Something simple, a walk, a meal, a shared memory. Watch how she responds, not just with words, but with effort. If she meets you halfway and leans in when you reach out, something must still be rebuilt. But if every effort is met with distance avoidance or vague disinterest, then it's not just time slipping away, it's emotional investment. Distance doesn't always mean there's someone else, but it always means something needs to be addressed. When a woman stops giving her attention, she's either overwhelmed, unfulfilled, or already somewhere else in her mind. And in relationships, silence isn't empty, it's full of signals waiting to be read. Sign 6. Sudden changes in appearance. Sometimes the first signs of emotional distance don't come in words, but in subtle shifts, like how she suddenly takes longer to get ready for work, or how her wardrobe changes almost overnight. You notice the heels she used to save for special dinners now echoing down the hallway before her morning meetings. Her lipstick's bolder, her style sharper, but somehow it never shows up for you. At first it seems harmless, but maybe even refreshing. People change, they evolve, but beneath the surface there may be more than meets the eye. When a woman begins paying noticeably more attention to her appearance, but not in the shared spaces of the relationship, it's worth pausing, not panicking, but noticing. Sometimes it's about confidence, a new role, a new environment, a desire to grow. Women often use appearance to step into a stronger version of themselves, especially in professional settings. But sometimes that transformation has less to do with self-growth and more with someone watching, someone new. This doesn't mean betrayal. It could mean she's trying to reclaim part of herself that's felt dormant. Yet the emotional truth is that intention hides behind behavior. If the extra effort only shows up when she leaves the house, not when she's around you, a message will be sent without words. And often, it's not about vanity, it's about where her attention and energy are drawn. A helpful way to understand it isn't to accuse but to engage. Compliment her genuinely. "You look nice today." Then watch not just her smile but the energy behind it. Does she light up, deflect, or change the subject? reactions reveal more than rehearsed answers ever could. If her style change is rooted in something personal or professional, she'll likely welcome your interest. But if it's connected to a dynamic she hasn't named yet, her discomfort will tell its own story. Still, appearance changes happen, and not every shift is a red flag. In truth, sometimes a woman upgrades her look, not to impress others, but to feel more aligned with herself. The key is context and consistency. Does she seem more confident or more distant? Is she showing up in the relationship with the same energy she's giving to the outside world, or is she pulling back while presenting forward? A quiet saying fits this moment well: attention always leaves a trail, and when her reflection starts to change, the trail it leaves can lead to understanding, if you're paying close enough attention to follow it. Sign 7. Evasiveness or defensiveness when asked about work. Sometimes the shift is almost invisible. You ask a simple question: how did it work? Who did you have lunch with today? Did that project finally get approved? Suddenly, the energy changed. She gives a vague answer or brushes it off with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Maybe she changes the subject or snaps with a sharpness that catches you off guard. What seems like a small moment often carries far more weight than it appears. When a woman becomes evasive or defensive about something as routine as her job, it can mean many things, but it's rarely meaningless. It's essential to resist the urge to jump to conclusions, but equally important not to dismiss the feeling that something's off. Defensiveness in conversation isn't always about hiding an affair. Sometimes it's about hiding emotional discomfort, guilt, confusion, or fear of being misunderstood. She may be protecting a boundary between her personal and professional life, something she feels entitled to keep separate. Or she may feel cornered by the question as though it implies suspicion or control. But when this reaction is sudden or specifically triggered by specific names or situations, it can point to more than just a desire for privacy. It might be a subtle sign of inner conflict. There's a difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy is healthy. Secrecy creates tension. When a woman gets irritated whenever you ask about her co-workers, or glosses over consistent parts of her day with increasing vagueness, what matters isn't just what she's saying, it's how she's saying it. Is she calm or agitated? Is she open or shutting down? Does the energy change only when specific topics come up? Emotional honesty reveals itself in patterns. One offhand reaction may mean nothing, but repetition is revealing. A woman with nothing to hide doesn't need to defend every question. She doesn't flinch when you're curious, because curiosity in a relationship should feel safe and not threatening. It's wise to ask gently, to stay grounded in calmness rather than confrontation. A relaxed tone lowers defenses and lets sincerity emerge. And if there's still resistance despite the gentleness, it may be time to ask yourself what that resistance protects. As the saying goes, truth doesn't mind being questioned. Lies do. Sometimes silence and deflection speak louder than answers. Real intimacy isn't about knowing every detail of her work life. It's about knowing that when something matters, you can talk about it without fear or deflection. And when that space closes off without reason, what remains is a question she might not be ready or willing to answer. Relationships thrive on trust, openness, and mutual understanding. While these signs may raise concerns, it's essential to remember that context matters. Changes in behavior don't always point to betrayal. Life stress, work pressure, or emotional disconnection can influence a partner's behavior. That's why the goal is not to jump to conclusions, but to approach the situation with calm curiosity, emotional maturity, and a willingness to listen. Suppose these signs stack up and leave you feeling uncertain or emotionally drained. In that case, it may be time to have an honest conversation or seek support to process your feelings clearly and constructively. A healthy relationship doesn't demand constant suspicion. It invites mutual respect, shared effort, and emotional safety. Protecting your well-being and self-respect is not just wise, it's necessary. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever noticed any of these signs in your relationship? How did you handle them? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more thoughtful insights on relationships, emotional well-being, and personal growth. See you in the next one.